A single drop of bat urine could save all of humanity. Can you believe it? Just because a drop of bat urine fell on the stone statue. In an instant, the statue cracked and a human eyeball emerged. Then, cracks gradually appeared on the stone on the statue's back. The only surviving man on Earth emerged from the stone. His name is Taiju. He has been sealed for 3,700 years. Now, he is the only surviving human on Earth. It turns out that 3,700 years ago, the Earth experienced an unprecedented disaster, and the unlucky Taiju was about to confess to the goddess he had secretly loved for 5 years. But before he could speak, a streak of golden light suddenly appeared in the sky, illuminating the Earth. Everyone was captivated by this spectacle. Taiju sensed something was wrong and immediately had the goddess hug the Sephora tree, while he stood in front, and at the moment of contact with the golden light, all humans were petrified. This disaster swept across the whole Earth. No human was spared. Planes uncontrollably crashed to the ground. The exploding fragments were fiery limbs petrified. Only a few animals escaped. This disaster targeted at humans, but humans did not die. Instead, they lived consciously within the statues. Without human activity, the Earth returned to that quiet era. Human structures gradually grew signs of life. Nature continuously washed away human footprints. The once towering buildings gradually collapsed, replaced by vibrant primeval forests, and it was Taiju's resolve to confess to the goddess that carried him through to today. 3,700 years later, a single drop of bat urine miraculously reversed Taiju's petrification. He walked out of the cave. Outside, all was petrified humans. After thousands of years of weathering, many statues had become heroic fragments. He made himself a grass skirt, then followed the topographic map in his mind to search, finally finding the Sephora tree from 3,700 years ago, and saw the goddess he had secretly loved for thousands of years. This was a confession spanning 1,000 years. I like you, for hundreds, for thousands of years. I have liked you, so moved. I wanted to offer my first kiss. Unexpectedly, engraved on the surface of the Sephora tree was a line of text. It turns out that Taiju was not the first human to be revived. His friend Senku had already revived a few months earlier. This made Taiju ecstatic. Senku then told Taiju, "It's now October 5th, 5738 AD. They had been sealed for 3,700 years. Taiju was curious how he knew such an exact date. It turns out that during the 3,700 years of being sealed, Senku used his strong will to record time by the second, but he found there was a risk of losing consciousness every time he counted to 800,000 seconds. So while he thought about how to save all of humanity, he kept time. Thus, after breaking out, he acted according to the thoughts he had before being sealed. In just half a year, he had moved from the primitive era to the Stone Age. But in the primitive era, relying solely on wisdom was not feasible. Senku was busy every day just surviving, let alone the crazy plan to revive all of humanity. But since the simple-minded but physically strong Taiju joined, everything became easier. Senku wants to decode the secret of human petrification and restore human civilization. Taiju is determined to revive his goddess. Together, they decide to start from zero and create civilization through science, becoming the Adam and Eve of the new era. After a hearty meal, Taiju sets out again to find food. He finds a grapevine laden with grapes and insists on tasting them after not having grapes for over 3,000 years. The expression on his face reveals the sweetness of the grapes. On his way back, Taiju passes the cave where he awoke and is shocked to discover bat urine dripping from the cave ceiling, collected by someone in a container. This causes his mind to short-circuit. Wondering if there are other surviving humans, Senku appears behind him, revealing that it was his doing in order to study the mystery of human petrification, as both were awakened by bat urine, which contains a high concentration of nitric acid with corrosive effects. After reviving, Senku had been using petrified swallows for experiments, all of which had failed. Senku believes the corrosiveness of nitric acid is too low, but by adding alcohol, a stronger industrial corrosive can be produced. Although Taiju does not understand the details, he is excited because the grapes he just picked are perfect for making wine. The two immediately go to work, collecting all the grapes from the vine and crushing them with their unwashed feet of 3,000 years. They stir the resulting liquid daily, and after 3 weeks, finally produce wine. The next and most difficult step is to distill alcohol from the wine. A challenging task because the pottery cannot withstand high temperatures. They decide to distill during winter when the cold temperatures can prevent the containers from breaking. After a year of experiments, they finally obtain high-concentration alcohol in the following spring. Senku pours the industrial corrosive on a petrified swallow, and a miracle occurs as the swallow takes flight after 3,000 years. Excitement unmistakable in their eyes. The decision of who to revive first is given to Taiju, who unsurprisingly chooses his goddess Yuzuriha. But is it truly possible to revive humans? Just as Senku is about to pour the solution, Taiju suddenly remembers that revival means being naked, insisting on bringing the goddess back to camp to prepare clothes for her revival. Suddenly, a lion's roar comes from behind, and a robust lion approaches, causing them to run for their lives. How could there be lions in Japan? In the 3,700 years of human petrification, with no human interference, the zoo lions had eaten all other animals and then street pets. Without further discussion, they choose to jump off a cliff to escape, knowing they cannot die from a fall in the primitive era. However, the lion continues to chase them. Getting closer, Taiju throws the goddess into Senku's arms, ready to block the lions, believing that saving humanity needs the genius of Senku's brain. But Senku immediately counters that not only brains but also Taiju's physical strength are needed in the primitive era. Neither can be spared. Taiju appeared thoughtful. Then he took Senku under a Taiju tree. He remembered that last time here, he discovered the strongest high school primate, Shishio Tsukasa, who once defeated 3 wild bulls barehanded. Taiju placed the goddess Yuzuriha aside, asking her to wait a while longer. Just as Senku was pouring the revival fluid on the statue, they were completely surrounded by lions. At the critical moment, the statue behind them rapidly shattered, and this strongest man on earth slowly opened his eyes. Merely the flying debris was enough to drive away the lions. The alpha lion, unconvinced, charged again, only to be scared off by a simple, unadorned punch. While Taiju was still rejoicing over having an extra helper, Senku grew more worried, because in this era without firearms, strength was the most uncontrollable factor. Tsukasa's beliefs were filled with awe for nature. To honor the lion, Tsukasa decided to use its fur to make a cloak. They then brought Tsukasa back to the camp. Shishio Tsukasa declared that with him around, they would never worry about lacking meat again, whether chasing boars on the plains, capturing geese barehanded, or fishing in the sea. Shishio Tsukasa demonstrated absolute strength, finally achieving freedom to eat meat. The plan to revive human civilization officially began, starting with finding the most important material, calcium carbonate, commonly known as lime. 3,700 years ago, by grinding shells into powder, they could extract the calcium carbonate. This kind of straightforward physical labor could be handled by Taiju alone. Calcium carbonate has 4 important uses. First, it can be used for agricultural fertilization. Second, it is used in building cement. Third, it can be used to make soap, which in this era without medical care, acts as a lifesaver due to its germicidal properties. However, Senku did not reveal the 4th use. At night, Taiju's snoring kept Tsukasa awake, while he seemed to be plotting something, and Senku was not in bed. He was outside alone, making a mysterious tool. The next day, Shishio Tsukasa opened up to Senku for the first time, sharing his past of being mistreated by the aristocracy. He believed that the elderly and children were burdens to human progress, unnecessary for revival. His ideal was to build a world of only young people, free from oppression and exploitation. He hoped to gain Senku's support, but Senku rejected his idea, aiming to use science to save everyone. As long as Shishio Tsukasa did not know the formula for the revival fluid, he could not harm them. In this covert clash, the straightforward Taiju could not understand. He was solely focused on reviving his goddess Yuzuriha, shouting that the miracle water was finally ready to revive Yuzuriha this time. Seeing that he could no longer hide the truth, Senku fortunately demonstrated the process of reviving the statues directly, but he mentioned that there was not enough miracle water left, and planned to have Taiju go back to the Bat Cave to retrieve more. Seeing the ingredients for the revival water within reach, Tsukasa would not miss this opportunity, claiming he could run faster than Taiju. After getting the location, he left to find the Bat Cave, and this was precisely Senku's strategy. They had to revive Yuzuriha before Tsukasa returned. The Bat Cave has now been exposed. If Tsukasa learns the formula for the revival fluid, he will surely execute them. So the two collaborated, quickly mixing the revival fluid. As the fluid was poured, the statue rapidly shattered. Images of his goddess Yuzuriha flooded Taiju's mind. Before they could catch up, Tsukasa suddenly returned. He realized he had been deceived. To protect his goddess, Taiju chose to face the strongest man on earth alone. In his charge at Shishio Tsukasa, he underestimated the man who could kill lions with his bare hands. Senku, realizing Taiju's recklessness, was already prepared to confront Tsukasa, hurriedly picking up a crossbow and firing at Tsukasa. Tsukasa dodged and struck back at Taiju, who incredibly took the blow. This shocked Tsukasa, as Taiju was the first to withstand his attack, and though Taiju had the chance to strike at a vulnerable moment, he did not take it. Ultimately, Taiju couldn't withstand the kick. Seeing no threat from the three, Shishio Tsukasa warned them not to interfere, then left to continue destroying statues. Seeing a crossbow bolt that could travel at 200 kilometers per second, Senku pondered, realizing that ordinary weapons couldn't compete with Tsukasa. They must develop more advanced weapons before he discovers this. Thus, they created a diversion, intentionally leaving misleading tracks for Tsukasa, then escaped in the opposite direction. Their destination was a volcanic crater near Mount Fuji, a source of materials for making scientific weapons. But in the primitive year 3700, the coordinates of Mount Fuji had shifted, making it difficult to precisely locate even with homemade instruments. At this moment, Yuzuriha discovered an open space where a large Buddha still stood, the Great Buddha of Kamakura. Confirming their sextant-derived route was correct, they continued their journey through mountains and storms, finally arriving at the base of Mount Fuji. All they needed was at the volcanic hot springs, a plentiful source of sulfur, an indispensable ingredient for making gunpowder. Meanwhile, Tsukasa, knowing Senku would not just flee, was certain they were making scientific weapons to counter him. With keen observation, Tsukasa instantly saw through Senku's plan and immediately pursued in their direction to stop them before they could make gunpowder. After many hardships, Senku finally gathered the ingredients for gunpowder, first adding cost-free sulfuric acid, then wood charcoal, and finally potassium nitrate. When all the ingredients were mixed, a bit of sugar was added to enhance the blend. The final step was to pound the mixture with wood 49 times, creating a powerful explosive. Hearing there was physical labor, Taiju immediately rushed over with a large rock, accidentally holding a piece of pyrite. The friction between them sparked. They prepared to flee but were too late to avoid being blasted away. Witnessing the power of the gunpowder, this immediately excited Senku. This thing could totally be used as a murder weapon, the kind-hearted goddess thought. Senku would use it against Tsukasa, but Senku said that this was not the only way. He planned to trade gunpowder with Tsukasa. If talks still break down, he would have to serve him with gunpowder. Meanwhile, Tsukasa had already spotted the thick smoke from the explosion and was rushing over at high speed. He had also confirmed that Senku had produced gunpowder. Both revealed murderous intents, just as Senku and his people were putting out the fire. The next scene stunned everyone, because in this era of human extinction, there was a signal fire not far away. Could it be that someone had revived before them? Clearly, this was not Tsukasa's doing. If the signal fire was in response to the recent explosion of black smoke, they must respond. Senku decided to continue to increase the fire, raising a signal fire, but doing so would expose the precise coordinates to Shishio Tsukasa. Tsukasa had also realized that Senku was planning to use gunpowder against him. To counter Senku, Shishio Tsukasa used the strongest move, which was to take Yuzuriha hostage to threaten Senku to hand over the formula for reviving humanity. This way, he could revive more humans to build his own military kingdom. Although Senku was concerned about the goddess's safety, he still showed an indifferent expression, but the next second, Tsukasa directly cut off the goddess's hair. This made Senku instantly unsettled. He could only compromise and reveal the formula for the revival fluid. Unexpectedly, Yuzuriha grabbed a knife and held it to her own neck, saying her death didn't matter, and urged Senku not to reveal the secret. But this also struck Senku's heart. Senku didn't want this kind woman to be hurt anymore, so he disclosed the entire formula for the revival fluid. Tsukasa continued to threaten Senku, saying if Senku stopped advancing civilization, he would spare his life. This made Senku recall his past. He had loved science sincerely since he was young. His father had sold their house to provide Senku with enough scientific equipment. He had successfully launched a rocket representing friendship. So faced with the choice between science and death, Senku decisively chose the latter. At this moment, Taiju also heard the noise from the mountain and quickly rushed over, but he was still a step late. As Tsukasa's blade fell, the man saw his brother being killed. He angrily picked up a rock, but did not throw it at the enemy. Instead, he threw the rock into the air. This completely confused Shishio Tsukasa. A nearby girl hurriedly threw a can towards Shishio Tsukasa. When Tsukasa kicked the incoming can, he realized it was filled with gunpowder. As the gunpowder scattered, the falling rock sparked, causing a fierce flame and resulting in billowing thick smoke. When the dust settled, a figure still stood there. The explosion had only burned his clothes. Meanwhile, Taiju and Yuzuriha had already escaped using the explosion as cover. Tsukasa let them go, because the mad scientist Senku's cervical spine had already been shattered, and in this stone age without medical equipment, even a bodhisattva couldn't save him. Taiju could not accept the reality. His dear brother could not just die in obscurity. This was because Senku's grand plan to revive humanity and civilization was not yet completed. While preparing to perform CPR on his good brother, Yuzuriha suddenly discovered that there was a small piece of the petrified statue left unremoved at Senku's cervical spine. Taiju decisively poured the remaining revival fluid on it. The next second, the DNA inside Senku reconnected, and the rock rapidly shattered. Indeed, the hope of all humanity could not so easily be extinguished. Before Senku was revived, his brilliant mind was rapidly working, recording time every second. A drop of bat urine miraculously revived him. The scientist's brain was indeed extraordinary. He recorded his petrified posture with stones and collected the fallen rock pieces from his body to facilitate future research on the secret of human petrification. All this was witnessed by a group of monkeys. How was the first stone monkey born on Earth to survive? First, he made a handy sharp tool by knocking various stones into shape, with the type of stone determining its use, successfully entering the Stone Age. Then, using the sharp tool, he scraped thorns from the vines to make ropes, tying them to a stick to create a simple fire-starting tool. The rising flames scared the silly monkeys quite a bit, but surviving in the Stone Age was truly challenging. Realizing he needed help, just next to where he was revived, lay his good brother Taiju. Senku, through continuous research on the mystery of human petrification, discovered a bat cave nearby, filled with the smell of nitric acid. Senku believed his unsealing was closely linked with nitric acid. Eventually, he dragged Taiju into the bat cave and soaked him in a nitric acid solution, believing firmly that Taiju would be revived. Just as Taiju believed in Senku at that moment, as the storm abruptly ceased, the flame of hope for human civilization was reignited, thrilling Taiju immensely. Now, in Tsukasa's eyes, Senku was already dust. He would surely use the revival fluid to build his own kingdom of force. Thus, Senku planned for Taiju and Yuzuriha to join Tsukasa as undercover agents, while he himself would seek out those who had sent up the smoke signals to form a revolution army using science. This farewell might be forever. Meanwhile, Tsukasa suddenly realized someone was following him. It was the girl who had sent the smoke signals. Without a word, they crossed swords, but her attacks were easily deflected by Tsukasa. The girl had seen Shishio Tsukasa kill Senku and thought Senku, who could summon explosions, was a sorcerer and she was out to avenge him. Now Tsukasa also confirmed that this woman was purely primitive and, not wanting to entangle further, he slapped her away with a single slap, then chopped down a nearby tree. The loud noise also caught Senku's attention. When Senku arrived at the scene, he saw the girl firmly pinned down by the tree. How to quickly rescue her? The man poured gunpowder into the tree trunk and then ignited it, blasting through the trunk. Then he assembled 3 simple axles and twisted the thorns from the vines into ropes. Thus, the first pulley of the primitive era was born. In the girl's astonished gaze, a 1-ton tree was easily lifted. Faced with this sudden confession, this completely baffled Senku, who had lived for 3,700 years. It turns out the girl's name was Kahaku, a native primitive person, and Senku was not the first human to be revived. To build his own kingdom of science, he needed a lot of manpower, and the village mentioned by the girl was the perfect choice for Senku. So Senku decided to go back with the girl. Then Kahaku fetched a bucket of hot spring water to take back to the village, all for her sick sister, which deeply moved Senku. In front of a big man, how could he let a woman do the hard labor? He tried to carry the bucket himself, but was immediately overwhelmed the next second. Kahaku advised him not to overexert himself. Indeed, thousands of years had taken a toll on his limbs, but his bursting intelligence was still there. He then used the pulley to make a rapid descent tricycle. Due to the steep slope, the speed of the tricycle was uncontrollable. Eventually, the tricycle broke. Kahaku landed gracefully with the big jar, while Senku ended up face-planting into the dirt. Looking ahead, Kahaku told Senku that this was her village, and in this era where all humanity was petrified, the villagers thrilled Senku enough to establish his kingdom of science. They then arrived at the bridge leading to the village. Suddenly, 2 strong men attacked, but both were easily blocked by Kahaku. Turns out the 2 were the village's guardians, Kinro and Jinro. Senku prepared to broaden these primitives' horizons, just rubbed his hand on some soap, and casually blew many soap bubbles, which scared the ignorant group senseless. Chrome immediately appeared before everyone. He saw through Senku's trick at a glance, claiming it could be made with just charcoal water, and then challenged Senku to a duel between sorcerers. He threw flour into the fire. The flames instantly burst into yellow. This amazed everyone, as different powders were added. The colors of the flames changed as well. This was Chrome's special skill. The primitives were all shocked. But Senku remained calm. This is just a flame reaction. Just need to throw in salt, copper, and sulfur in that order. The primitive era should not have copper. Maybe it was the blue rocks collected from the cave. This scared Chrome, wondering who exactly this was. With this divine operation, Chrome's secret base piqued Senku's interest. Indeed, it was full of incredible treasures, various materials that are the cornerstone of scientific advancement. To have the villagers join the kingdom of science, he must first deal with the village's guardians. After all, one is beholden to those who provide. First, crush the cinnabar, then pour it into a container to burn. After heating, you can obtain mercury, melt in the mercury, and finally place Kinro's spearhead into the container. In no time, a golden spearhead is born in brilliance, although Kinro verbally refuses to accept it. Thinking of his new appearance with his name, he wisely leaves quietly. On the other side, Kahaku brings hot spring water to her sister, who is named Ruri, a highly respected witch in the village. She has been plagued by illness for decades. Chrome has been in love with Ruri since childhood, becoming a sorcerer to find a cure for Ruri's illness. This act also touches Senku, who deepens his understanding of science, telling him all about the history of human development from 3,700 years ago. Chrome, hearing about such advanced technology for the first time, is astonished. But it makes him wonder what caused such a powerful civilization to vanish in an instant. Senku argues it hasn't been destroyed. The accumulation of millions of years of humanity is now all stored in his brain. This ignites Chrome's fighting spirit, and he resolves to build a scientific kingdom with Senku. Starting with curing Ruri's illness, Senku has already figured out the treatment, creating the scientific cure-all antibiotics, which can only be extracted from sulfonamide and stones. Although feasible, it requires a lot of manpower and effort. Hearing this, both are highly motivated, seeing time and effort as plentiful. If they successfully produce antibiotics, it means they've leaped through 2 million years of scientific history in one go. The simplicity of the process terrifies them, but they realize they lack the essential iron for the experiment. Senku advises patience, then starts intensively teaching them physics and chemistry, from day until night, with the duo barely grasping the basics. Accidentally, Chrome pulls out a homemade compass. Senku immediately recognizes it as a magnet. With the magnet, finding iron becomes much easier. They just need to jump into the river with the magnet to collect iron sand from the riverbed. But with just their three, the workload is too much. The villagers, viewing science as sorcery, won't help. Just then, a watermelon floats by. It turns out to be Suka, the village's most helpful member. For Senku, another helper is certainly welcome. Suka, recognized for the first time, is highly motivated. Becoming the ultimate tool person, they finally gather the needed iron sand, a full basket's worth. Now, they only need to mix the iron sand with carbon in a 4:1 ratio and heat it. But this is no simple experiment, as making iron requires a temperature of 1,500 degrees Celsius, and the highest temperature wood can reach is only 700 degrees Celsius. So, to reach the necessary flame temperature, the four become human bellows, working desperately. When they learn it might take many more hours, they exclaim in desperation. After a day of relentless iron making, the next day they can hardly feel their hands. Upon opening the furnace, the iron sand remains unchanged, declaring the experiment a failure. Senku stated that the most important task at the moment is to expand the workforce, and to get the villagers to help. Their demands must be met. Suka is exceptionally skilled at gathering intelligence, transforming into a master detective. She lurked in every corner of the village, eavesdropping on the villagers' demands. She eventually overheard crucial information. The villagers were tired of eating grilled fish every day. This immediately sparked a plan in Senku's mind. He believed that to win over the villagers, he needed to capture their stomachs. Thus, he decided to create the world's most delicious dish, and soon, a steaming bowl of Lanzhou ramen was presented before everyone. Chrome was the first to taste it, and the flavor made everyone crave more. Kahaku and Suka also got confused after tasting it. For Senku, it was the first time in 3,700 years that he had eaten such normal food. This taste was enough for the unsophisticated primitives. The first Stone Age ramen cart thus appeared at the entrance of the village. Senku planned to rule the village with his scientifically delicious ramen. Whether it was the village's bachelors or the charming village belle, everyone was captivated by this rare delicacy. Naturally, Senku became the idol of the young girls. The villagers ate enthusiastically, and at this moment, Senku finally showed his capitalist side. After eating, of course, they had to pay with their labor. Just when Senku was feeling smug, a voice was heard nearby. After eating this, I feel like drinking a cola. This completely baffled Senku, as no one from the primitive era should know about cola. Seeing that this person was not from the village, Kahaku and Kinro and Jinro immediately went into combat mode. This person must be a modern human who has been revived. Apart from Senku, only Shishio Tsukasa had the formula to revive humans. Senku instantly recognized the mysterious person's identity. His name was Asajiri Gen, a magician before being petrified. But Senku didn't care. As long as someone had eaten the ramen, they had to work. After 3 days and nights of intense blowing, the iron sand finally melted, and the iron-making experiment was declared a success. Seeing the iron furnace, Gen's attitude changed. He was a complete opportunist, siding with whoever was stronger. His original job was to confirm whether Senku was truly dead. If Shishio Tsukasa knew that Senku was still alive, he would personally come to besiege the village. However, now that Senku possessed the capability to make iron, it was uncertain who would win between the Empire of Might and the Kingdom of Science. For Gen, both sides had their advantages. The Kingdom of Science was more tiring but had scientific tools and delicious ramen, while the Empire of Might was like a primitive tribe, which greatly annoyed Kahaku. However, Senku was full of confidence. To completely win over Gen, Senku planned to use the newly obtained iron to build a power station, to make him wholeheartedly follow the Kingdom of Science. But in this Stone Age era with nothing, building a power station was easier said than done. First, they needed to make an electromagnet, and under thunder and lightning, it was the best time to create an electromagnet. Senku and his team did not dare delay. First melting copper blocks, then applying insulating varnish on an iron rod, carving a groove in a plank, and pouring the melted copper into the groove to successfully make copper wire. Finally, just wrap the copper wire around the iron rod. At this time, Maguma from the village came looking for trouble with his gang. Senku understood that now was not the time to conflict with them. In a critical moment, Gen stepped forward. He had Suka bring a bunch of flowers and showed these primitives what magic is. Truly a magician, Gen managed to scare them off with a simple demonstration. Senku and the others then got back to the main topic. They reached the mountaintop where Chrome had found the magnets, the perfect place to be struck by lightning. As the storm approached, Kahaku took Kinro's weapon and thrust it fiercely into the ground. The lightning hit the target perfectly, creating a powerful electromagnet, but Kinro's spear was shattered. Next, they hammered the copper 81 times to make copper sheets and coated the copper wire with insulating paint to make electrical wires. Fortunately, their efforts were not in vain, and the generator was finally completed. However, generating electricity was not so easy in this primitive era. Relying on thermal and wind energy was nothing but a daydream. They could only use the most controllable and physically demanding method, human-powered electricity. Senku and the others turned to Kinro and Jinro for help, but since the spear was destroyed, they refused to cooperate. This was when Gen stepped in, tricking them into agreeing by mentioning the spear and silver spear. Senku declared that it was time to test their results. He climbed onto the roof, curiously asking Chrome if he was afraid of the night. Chrome was confused. Just as the copper wire touched the bamboo fiber, a dazzling white light illuminated their faces, and the night, 3,700 years later, was lit once again, astonishing the animals in the forest. Gen was stunned on the spot.